Mike, your movie this week is called The Deadly Bees. See, it's just that my civilization needs me, and so I have to...
This time we watched Season 9, Episode 5, The Deadly Bees.
Deadly bees? They may be deadly, but they're actually not all that busy. They go at a fairly relaxed pace.
Okay, but first, some fairly relaxed follow-up, except we don't have fairly relaxed follow-up because I'm also going at a fairly relaxed pace, like an eager bee.
Good for you, Chris. Good for you.
Well, you say that. Last time we recorded the episode a few hours after we released the previous episode. This time we're recording it a few hours before.
Ooh, that's totally exciting. It's kind of nice that our release dates and our recording dates are lining up so perfectly, except for in the follow-up category.
Exactly. So we have no idea. As far as we're concerned, the most recent episode was several episodes ago. And you know why?
Why?
Because there's a whole lot of Hyrule to explore.
I have heard such things, I have seen such things, but I understand they still haven't quite fixed the climbing in the rain mechanic that drives my family so bonkers.
Well, your family hasn't gotten very far into the game yet because they have. Spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom. You can now climb in the rain if you have the right gear and or potions.
Excellent. Well, I will have to pass that information along because there was much tearing of hair and throwing of controllers. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not all that much. So, it was a mechanic in the first game that they really didn't like, and it tended to have them avoid certain sections of Hyrule. So it's good to know that that's been addressed. Wow. Okay. Well, obviously, we've solved all the problems of the world, and it's time to wrap up our podcast now.
Well, yeah, so I apologize to our listeners for being so far behind. Everything should be out by the end of the month, though, which is, because this is now the next month. This is weird. But just know that I'm about 100 hours into the game, and it's very good, and there's still quite a lot to go.
Oh, there always is with that game, though. It's what makes it so wonderful.
It's such a treat. What else? Do we have any other follow-up? Well, you were going to ask your dad about bees, but we're going to get to that in a little bit. But I guess we should just get to it. Huh?
Okay, well, I guess an eager beaver is just not the same thing as a busy bee now, is it? I'll be both.
Okay, well, at a very relaxed pace, let us go on to talk about today's movie.
This time, we watched Season 9, Episode 5, The Deadly Bees. I believe 99% of the problems in movies could be solved with better communication. The layers of this in The Deadly Bees are extraordinary. First, a mean-ass beekeeper has told a government agency that he has a strain of deadly bees, and he's going to kill someone to prove it. But do they tell anybody about it? No! That would be way too helpful, and of course, avert the whole movie's plot. Second, a pop star is exhausted. She is overworked, and she needs a break. But does she say anything about it? Well, yes, actually she does, to her assistant, but no one believes women when they talk about their own health needs, so this talking doesn't help. Her pushy agent makes her go, 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 go! So she faints and needs medical attention. Since this is the 60s, she's sent to the country to recuperate, and of course, it's where the deadly bees are, so best vacay ever? Next. A husband and a wife live on a farm. It's her farm, but he's only into bees, and she's only into her dog and smoking. They never talk, except in short, resentful tones. Is this what people thought marriage was in the 60s? Ugh. Since the husband never shares anything about what he's thinking with his wife, she assumes he's responsible when the dog she loves gets killed by the bees he loves. So she burns the hives. I mean, this is a horrible relationship. But back to the pop star. The husband agrees to host the pop star as she convalesces. The husband knows there's killer bees on the island. He knows what the deadly bee man is up to. But does he tell anyone? No, not even his own house guest, after she clearly tells him she's visited this bad guy. Oh, sure, he warns her not to talk to that guy, end those visits, but he does it with such condescension that she pays him no mind. Not even his wife knows why he hates the deadly bee man, and if she knew, she would never have blamed him for the dog dying. Anyway, the pop star naturally assumes the husband is the keeper of the deadly bees because he's so cagey and mean. The husband beats the dog. He experiments on his horse and leaves it scabby. Who thinks the good guy is the one who beats the dog and experiments on the horses? No one thinks that. Since no one has told the pop star anything useful to help her navigate country life, she's easily swayed by the deadly bee man to steal information from the husband and to set him up as the perpetrator of crime. And he nearly gets away with it too, but little did deadly bee man know that the pop star is a fire starter. So she smokes out the bees to escape murder attempt number 1. Second attempt is way more forthcoming. Deadly Bee Man is all about communicating. I mean, he told the government he was going to kill someone with his deadly bees, and he did. And now he's doing it again. So he tells the pop star everything in a long, convoluted flashback montage. And unfortunately for Mr. Communication, the pop star accidentally burns down the house, killing him and all his bees. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, previously on the Satellite of Love, we open with a montage of dramatic moments in the ongoing soap opera that has been Season 9 so far. Remember that moment when Mike was an ER doctor trying to save Tom's life? Or when GPC admitted her love for Mike over a romantic dinner? Or when Tom and Crow had Mike in the hot seat about that crime he tried to commit? Oh, so much drama. Now, none of these scenes actually happened previously on the Satellite of Love, of course, but what if MST3K had an ongoing plotline? I mean, just imagine what it would be like. Anyway, meanwhile in Castle Forrester, the 2 other observers drop in. They've apparently been hunting down Brain Guy since he made off with Pearl and Bobo after Mike and the nanites destroyed their homeworld back in Season 8, Episode 8, The She-Creature. Well, anyway, the observers have managed to reconstitute the planet, and now they want to bring Brain Guy home. But Brain Guy's gotten used to his life of chowing on chili dogs with Bobo. So he's torn between his duties to his homeworld and his love for his new life. But first, we need to watch the movie, and then watch Crow and Tom dress up in Elizabethan outfits. Crow expresses his love for Mrs. Hargrove, the chain-smoking, neglected beekeeper's wife, with a sonnet filled with allusions to old cigarette advertising slogans. Tom plays along on the crumhorn. Okay, then we watch some more movie, and then finally we're back to Castle Forrester, where Brain Guy is packing his bags and singing a jaunty farewell song. And as Bobo and Pearl cry out for him to please stay, it becomes a whole musical number in multiple parts with the harmonies and the counterpoint singing and all that jazz. Real theater kid energy in this bit. And after some more movie, Mike pops out in a bee costume, determined to communicate as the bees do, through odor and movement. Well, maybe just movement this time. But he expresses some very nuanced philosophical and artistic ideas with his bee butt, which, alas, only Tom can understand. Okay, but what about the observer plot? Well, Brain Guy gets Pearl and Bobo to help swipe the observer's brain pans, giving Brain Guy the opportunity to transform them into mere mortals. Mortals stuck working at a dairy plant in Wisconsin. And then, just like in the movie, it all ends with a mysterious inspector in a trench coat showing up and nodding to the camera. What do you think, sirs?
So I'm confused.
Okay.
I'm confused about the plot line because I thought when they came out of the wormhole, they kind of went back in time to real-time Earth. And so is this prior to the observer planet being destroyed, or did they really reconstitute the planet? Like, where are we in the timeline of the MST3K continuation plot universe?
Now you know that everybody's going to be tapping on the sign right now.
Okay, I know, it's just a show. It's just a show. It's just a show.
But yeah, you're right. They've definitely carefully thought through this plot.
Well, and the opening, I initially thought when I was watching the episode, like, am I watching the right episode? Are we back in season 8? And then I was like, oh no, they are in Castle Forrester, but I guess Castle Forrester hasn't made it to the opening credits yet. Does Castle Forrester ever make it to the opening credits, or is it always just the VW bus? Because I'm okay with it staying just the VW bus. I love that VW microbus.
No, I believe it's just season 10 that has the Castle Forrester opening.
Okay. All right. So for the entire rest of season 9, they're going to be in Castle Forrester, but the microbus is still going to be in the opening credits.
Yeah, it's a short season. I mean,
Okay.
It's just 13 episodes in seasons 9 and 10.
Okay. Awesome. Well, again, I'll just have to remind myself it's just a show. I don't need to worry about the opening credits not perfectly aligning with what's happening plot-wise, because why is there a plot?
Yeah, why is there a plot? It's a good question. And I mean, there's a plot so that we have an excuse to have something to do, I guess, and it allows Mike and Paul to dress up as observers. So,
I mean, I don't mind that. Little Jell-O mold brain in a pan. Who can object to such a thing?
I mean, they'd already made the costumes. They may as well get a little bit more use out of them.
Seriously. I know. Yeah.
Did you like the Deadly Bees?
I guess it was okay. It wasn't my favorite episode. It wasn't a terrible episode. I do have to say, I really loved Mike in the little bee costume, like shaking his little bee butt and moving his little bee antennas. That was really awesome. I think that might be my favorite sketch so far out of season 9. Did you enjoy it?
I did. I found this movie to be a bit like What If the Projected Man and the Killer Shrews had a baby?
Oh.
Because, you've got the sort of experiments with deadly animals, but you've also got, it's set in England in the 60s, and it's got that weird color grading and so forth. And it feels like, having watched The Projected Man and riffed that, they really got most of the anti-England jokes out of their system.
Sure, except for the food stuff.
We get one or two things here or there, a little food stuff, a little knickers, haha, isn't that a funny word kind of stuff. But like, at a reasonable level. It's not pummeling you with it like they did in Projected Man.
Yeah, I feel like they only said spotted dick like 2 or 3 times instead of like every 2 to 3 minutes.
Exactly. So I kind of enjoyed this episode. I low-key enjoyed this episode for a season 9 episode, let's say. Which is a shame because this is one of the episodes that is not available and has never been put on DVD or streaming.
Did they just not have rights to the movie anymore or something?
Exactly. The people who own the rights do not want to share it. It doesn't look like that's being resolved. This is one of the episodes where the sketches were collected for what appears to be the final DVD box set of classic episodes to be released. They just put the sketches out so that you can see that. So if you want to watch the butt dance, the bee butt dance.
It's so good.
Officially, you can do that. And if you want to watch the entire episode, you have to scrounge around for it.
There's a riff that they totally missed doing that I just kind of missed the whole time. And that was talking about the Blind Melon No Rain song with the little girl in her bumblebee costume looking for people to dance with. Like, I can't believe they didn't bring that up. It wasn't that much earlier than this episode that song came out.
That is true. I mean, they can't do every joke you want them to do.
I guess that's true. I'm so charmed by that video, even, 30 years later. So, I guess that's on me.
It was one of my mother's favorite videos from the era as well.
It was so cute, the little girl in her bumblebee costume. And they have Mike in a bumblebee costume, so it just,
Yeah, they could have easily done No Rain. It's
totally.
true.
He could have tap danced. It would have been enough. Oh, well. But I enjoyed the riffs in general.
Yeah, no, me too. I don't know. I got nothing more to say here. Do I? Let me just check. Oh, you know what? I do have to say, this is a bit of a horror movie. It's put out by Amicus, who are sort of the cut rate hammer horror. Or, I don't know. Cut rate might be the wrong term, but they're the alternative. They are the less well-known hammer horror equivalent of UK horror films from the 60s and so forth. We talked about Amicus before when we looked at season 11's At the Earth's Core.
Ooh, that was before my time. What exactly makes this a horror movie? Like, are there specific thresholds it has to meet in order to constitute horror?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, and we might talk about that a little more. I don't have an answer. I'm not a horrorologist. I'm not even into horror terribly, and this was a little bit too much for me at points. The scene where the wife gets killed is real yucky.
Sure, it's yucky.
I mean, I'm not saying it's the worst thing I've ever seen, but
No.
it was yuckier than I expected from an MST3K episode. Let's put it that way. It wasn't splitting open the elephant's trunk in Gamma versus Jiger, kind of yucky, but what is?
Totally. And that was not a horror movie. Well, I'm just thinking of plenty of movies that are not horror movies that have worse death scenes than that, you know?
Sure. It's not gory in that sense, but it is, I don't know, it's upsetting. Also because, that wife was my favorite character in the movie.
I am not at all surprised that she was your favorite character.
Oh, man. All right. So this is a thing that sort of annoyed me, but not to the point where I hated the episode, which is that Mike and the bots make a lot of fun of the Hargroves, our main beekeeping couple, for being joyless.
Well, they're not wrong, Chris.
They're not wrong, but first off, this is sci-fi era MST3K. Not exactly the most joyful period of the show's history.
Granted. Mm-hmm.
And secondly, let them. It's okay. People don't have to be happy. It's fine.
True. But once again, this all could have been saved if she had just, when he was courting her, said, I want to marry someone who will run the farm.
She did. That's the whole point.
No, he wants to be with bees.
Yes. But this is the whole thing, is that he lied. He's been awful to her for the longest time. He lied to her. He married her for her money and for her farm. He's from off the island. He's not a local. And he's racking up debts at the bar and so forth. And he's just neglecting her and neglecting everything. And she's been stuck and she hates it. She's been ground down by this guy.
Yeah, well, that's fair because he doesn't do any communicating. But neither does she.
I mean, she communicates her disdain for him and for the whole situation.
Mm-hmm. And she also just refuses to participate in that marriage and that running of the farm at all. Because quite frankly, she can run that farm. She does not need him. She is clearly a competent individual. She just made a bad husband choice. It happens.
It's true. I'm not saying this movie does a great job of exploring the nuances of that situation.
Ew.
But I sympathize with her more than Mike and the bots did. Let's put it that way. And I wanted only the best for her.
Yeah, fair enough. Although I have to say, I appreciated the riffs of him walking into the room and them having something like, I just came in to say how much I love you. Or,
oh yeah. Some of them were funny. I just don't like enforced happiness. You must be happy or we will make fun of you and shun you. It's how irritating that is.
Fair enough. But again, she could have found a better way to deal with it than just feeding meat to the dog and smoking. She needed to burn those hives down earlier and more effectively, like when he was going to be gone for more than 5 minutes.
But so, we have a movie that, as we find out in the opening credits, was based on a book called A Taste for Honey.
See, and I thought, when I read that, I was like, that's a disco band. They based this movie off of, but no, it's 10 years before the disco band would come out.
Yes, also the disco band is A Taste of Honey.
Yes, it's true.
They recorded Boogie Oogie Oogie, if everybody remembers that.
Which clearly I do.
Yeah. And A Taste of Honey is also the name of a song that the Beatles covered at one point, which Crow breaks into during the thing, A Taste for Honey. A Taste for Honey, tasting much sweeter than wine. I'm going to cut that. But A Taste for Honey is a different thing entirely. It's a novel from 1941, written by a guy named Gerald Hurd, or H.F. Hurd.
Oh, and I take it you tracked down a copy of this and you read it?
I did.
Ooh.
Also, I know what you're thinking. H.F. Hurd, where does the Gerald come from?
Do I really wonder where the Gerald came from? I kind of wonder where the Gerald went, right?
Well, the F stood for Fitzgerald.
Oh, of course.
So he went by Gerald because you can do that, I guess.
Sure, the F stands for Fitzwilliam. Fitzwilliam Darcy.
There you go.
Maybe.
But everybody called him Bill. Bill Darcy.
I mean, wow. That would have been a way different series and book if they had called him Bill.
But yes, I tracked down a copy of this book. You can still buy it. It's still in print or in ebook print, certainly. I think it's in paperback print as well, because the book had kind of a good press.
Oh.
It has really nice blurbs from people like Raymond Chandler, who called it a very clever thriller, and Vladimir Nabokov, who said, I enjoyed it hugely. I like both of those authors. They both write real well.
Yeah.
Much better than Gerald Hurd does, in my opinion.
Man, do you think somebody just paid for the blurbs or what?
No, I don't know what was going on there, but I do know that Gerald Hurd was kind of a big deal.
Huh.
In his way. He was a writer and thinker who got really interested in things like meditation and yoga and psychedelics.
Wow, in 1941? That's like way early for those things.
Well, some of them were going more into the 60s. He was around for a while, and I don't know when these blurbs came from. Yeah, no, he was an English person. He was the first science commentator for the BBC, which seems pretty wild.
Yeah, it does.
He worked with people like Aldous Huxley and Bill W. from Alcoholics Anonymous.
Holy criminies!
He guided Bill W. on his first LSD trip.
Stop! I want to meet this man. He sounds amazing.
He's most known for a big book called The 5 Ages of Man. You'll be surprised to learn that we're in the 4th age.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess I have something to look forward to then. Who knew?
Yeah, the idea was that the 4th age is when individualism is at its peak, and that we all need to sort of break through to the 5th age and have broader consciousness. You know where this is going with the meditation and yoga and psychedelics and all that.
Sure, yeah. Wow, but I didn't know I had so much to look forward to.
So this book had also been turned into a movie once before.
Oh.
Or rather, not a movie, a TV show. It was an episode of a TV serial drama, you know.
Was there more like detective work inside of it then, trying to figure out where the deadly bees were coming from? Because it seemed to me like even from the very beginning of the movie, most people knew who had the deadly bees, except for the pop star woman.
Well, detective work is kind of what's going on, except also in the book, people kind of know from the very beginning. In the book, we don't have a pop star woman. We have a guy, a loner of a guy who's a bit of a nothing burger, eccentric, and so forth. He moves out to this small village because he wants to get away from people, and he really likes honey.
Sure.
And so he meets up with the local couple, the Hargroves. It's spelled Heregrove, but I think it's still pronounced Hargrove in England. Mm-hmm. They pronounce things weird sometimes.
Sure.
Anyway, the Hargroves sell him, and then she dies in the first chapter. From bee stings.
Oh, so we never get that fantastic characterization that we talked about?
No, we don't really get. We have like one scene where she's selling honey, and that's it with her. So it's unfortunate. We do get a little bit of background eventually that, yeah, similarly, he married her for the money and for the farm. And
is that consistent in the book and that prior TV show, or are you referring exclusively to the book right now?
I haven't seen the prior TV show, which was on an ABC show from 1955 called The Elgin Hour, which apparently has been found. It was considered kind of lost for a while, but it looks like it's been released on DVD. But, you know, I can only do so much.
Fair enough, yeah.
But the interesting thing about that is that it stars Boris Karloff.
Stop it! How does this author book have so many amazing names attached to it?
Indeed. Boris Karloff plays the other beekeeper who we meet in the film.
The deadly beekeeper man?
Yeah. Well, that's who he is in The Deadly Bees. In this case, he's a guy named Mycroft, who is also kind of new to town, and he's studying bees to understand their psychology a bit more.
Isn't Mycroft the name of Sherlock Holmes's nemesis?
Not his nemesis.
Oh, his brother. Oh, my gosh.
Brother.
You're right.
And you have figured it out.
Stop.
This is secretly a Mycroft Holmes story.
Man, people do so much in the Sherlock Holmes universe. I am always like shocked and amazed and slightly appalled. Like, why has a fictional character and a fictional universe had such an influence on so many storylines?
Sure.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. There have been a bunch of Mycroft Holmes stories that have happened after the Holmes books stopped being made by Conan Doyle. This is probably the most notable and famous of them, although there's a more recent series of Mycroft Holmes novels that were written by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Oh my God,
and a ghostwriter or a friend.
Sure. Once again, I'm just going to just be amazed at how many famous names of extraordinary people are attached to this in some sort of way. Anyway. Oh my gosh. So Mycroft.
Yeah, so Mycroft is also new to town. He's studying bees. His dog got killed by bees one day.
Oh.
And he thinks that Hargrove is responsible, that he's making the deadly bean. So that's chapter 2. Already in chapter 2, we have fingered the culprit, and the rest of the book, which is pretty short, is going to be, how are we going to prove it to our satisfaction? The police will never understand. The police will never listen to it. And eventually it becomes, I guess, spoilers, that Mycroft realizes they're going to have to take matters into their own hands.
Dun, dun, dun.
And so Mycroft uses our narrator, who is very much in the I'm a bumbling idiot following the Sherlock Holmes figure while he does amazing things. Anyway, they basically find a better version of the chemical that they spray on everything that attracts the bees and makes them go wild. This is an odorless version of it.
Oh.
And so when Mycroft sprays Hargrove with it, he doesn't know that he's been sprayed. And so later on, the bees come and attack him, and he dies. And the police are like, well, he should have burned the bees when we told him to after his wife died.
Good Lord. So in the book, Hargrove is the bad guy?
Yes, as he should be in this movie.
Well, he totally is awful in the movie. There's no part of him that's good. But I'm confused. So Hargrove had made a substance that had odor, so like people knew when they'd been touched with it, because in this movie the substance that attracts the bees, the smell of fear and adrenaline, is not detectable for humans.
Right.
So in the book there were two, one that was detectable and one that was not.
Exactly. And the book is very interested in this kind of science stuff. Most of the bee science that we learn in the movie is taken from the book.
Oh.
But the book goes on more because it's a book and they can do that. And even a short book can have more words in it explaining bee science than a movie can.
It's the Moby Dick for bees.
It's not quite that long, but yes.
My goodness, just whole chapters devoted to beekeeping that has nothing to do with the storyline, but still phenomenal.
I mean, Mycroft Holmes is supposed to be like the smarter of the Holmes brothers.
Depending on the adaptation that you're looking at.
Sure.
Yes.
In the Conan Doyle books, he is the smarter one who has a government job and doesn't want to be an investigator because he just doesn't have the moxie for it, or he doesn't want to break up his routine.
And doesn't give a crap about other people, so he doesn't care enough, really.
Yeah.
Like Sherlock, at least, wants to pay attention to people and their idiosyncrasies and finds it fascinating. Mycroft's just like, people, bleh, we hates them.
So both the narrator talks endlessly about himself and Mycroft talks endlessly about bees, and it's a really talky book. And I guess if you like that, you might give it those kinds of glowing reviews like Nabokov and Chandler did. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a bit much for me, but at least it was short. One of the things I did like about it was that it's about these two outsiders who moved to small town England.
Oh, yeah.
And you get a bit of this in the film as well, where you've got Mr. Hargrove, who seems to be an outsider to the town, although he is settled in, but he's not sort of one of them. He's not quite the same as the pub keeper or some of the other people in town.
Yeah.
And you've got the pop star coming into this other situation of like, how is the worldly pop star going to go to this small rural island and engage with everyone? So you get this very interesting exploration of insider-outsider small town dynamics. Mm-hmm. I think neither does them as well as they could, but I think it's an interesting thing in the book that they kept but undersold in the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I never got the impression from the movie that Hargrove was an outsider. In fact, he seemed more like an insider than his wife in that he actually interacted with people in town and seemed to have relationships with other people in town, although there is the suggestion that one of his relationships is an affair.
Right.
And I don't know how accurate that is or whether that happens in the book or not, but I totally feel like Hargrove goes to the pub and interacts with people inside of town and knows other people inside of town. And the wife just seems to care about her dog.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine, again, but
I don't know whether the wife is meant to be local, but I feel like you're supposed to pick up from things like accents and demeanor that the Hargroves are outsiders. In the book, it is our narrator who has the housekeeper, who is a local woman who talks in a thick accent and is a blabbermouth, and he can't stand her. Like, he came out to the country to not hang out with the locals and avoid people. And then there's this like gossipy housekeeper who keeps trying to engage with him as like a normal person.
So like the opposite of Wuthering Heights, where the housekeeper's telling the whole story and the guy actually wants to hear it. In this case, it's a housekeeper who's like, I want to tell you things. And he's like, shut up.
Oh, did you hear that poor dear Hargrove died? Oh, stung by his own bees.
Ooh, yes.
He walks out of the room while she's telling him the story, and she's incensed that he would give up such good gossip.
Wow.
Someone died and you're walking out on the story. Jeez. But also, there is no hint of an affair between the narrator and the housekeeper, or with Mycroft and the housekeeper.
That makes sense. The housekeeper sounds like an older woman, middle-aged. She doesn't sound like a teenager. Like the girl inside of this movie is a teenager.
Sure.
Who is part of the family of the people at the pub. I think it was like the niece or something of the barkeep. I couldn't really care enough to pay attention.
Sure. There's that. But also, Gerald Hurd dedicated the novel to his former romantic partner, Christopher Wood.
Oh.
He may have broken up with Christopher Wood, although I think they remained friends for quite a while afterwards. Or at least they stopped sleeping together because after enough time with meditation and yoga, he devoted himself to celibacy as part of his consciousness expanding thing. So, yeah, there's no hint of an affair happening at all in this book.
Man, are you telling me that the fifth age of man is going to be celibate for all of us, Chris? I think I don't have anything to look forward to.
Read the book and find out. So last time when we were talking about killer shrews, you mentioned that when you were young, your father kept bees for a while. Was it as exciting as this movie made it seem?
I mean, he pretty much had hives that he had to go and maintain, but it's not like he was developing a killer bee strain, or he didn't have some sort of scientific lab inside of one of our back rooms where he could develop, the smell of fear in order to drive his bees to kill.
Now, are you sure?
Well, I mean, in that my mother is still alive, and as far as I know, there wasn't a something written up in the Pacifica Tribune about mysterious murders by bees.
But you didn't get to live amongst the bees. They didn't buzz and keep you up at night.
No, the bees that my father kept, as I mentioned last time, were part of a 4-H group, which is a organization that lives inside of communities and is devoted to having young people have experiences with animals and with other parts of farming and agriculture and things like that, and to have some experiences with that as young people. Anyway, he ran the local beekeeping group. My sister was a part of the group. There were hives, but they weren't inside of our yard or on our property. My parents' house has a very small backyard.
Sure.
So
yes.
It wasn't really something that was equipped to have hives.
Bees are very small is the thing.
No, it's true. But there's lots of them inside of a hive. And they need to have free range to be able to visit flowers and other things inside of the area to be able to gather pollen that actually makes the honey and things like that.
Wait. You're saying that unlike the guy in this movie, you can't just have the hives in your living room behind a panel?
I mean, it is really amazing that that's not the way it goes. But honestly, Chris, his panel is not all that different from the beehive that they have like at the local Oregon Zoo, where you can walk in and you can see a beehive behind a pane of glass, and they have exits out of the building so that the bees can go range and collect pollen and bring it back. So you can set up a beehive behind plates of glass where you could see what your bees are doing. But if your goal is to extract honey, I can't imagine that that's a very convenient setup for it.
Right.
So, but anyway, my father, they expanded the bees that they had. They only started with like 1 or 2 hives. And by the time he had to close the beekeeping section of 4-H in Pacifica, they were up to 6 hives. And they had to close it because there were neighborhood complaints.
What?
Yeah.
Of the buzzing? Or of the murders?
It was not the murders. Chris, I don't even want to suggest that there was like a string of nasty murders going on in the early 80s in Pacifica, California that could have been made into a wonderful fictionalized novel set. But They had complaints because the place where the hives were was close to some very expensive homes that some wealthy people lived at, and they considered the bees a nuisance. And back in the early 80s, people didn't think so highly of bees. There wasn't all of this grand talk about needing to save the pollinators and about how bees were dying and we had to protect them with everything and, stop the poisons and all of these things hurt bees. Like, that wasn't part of the big conversation. Bees were a nuisance inside of residential areas, and there were huge limits to the number of beehives that you could keep. And so 6 hives was too many. There were complaints from the neighbors, nuisance complaints. I don't think there were noise complaints. So they ended up having to donate the beehives and transport them to Elkis Ranch, which is south of Pacifica. And they got all of the beekeeping equipment as well and the honey extraction stuff and everything. So, and as far as my parents know, they still have any of that stuff. So, and Elkis Ranch was still a ranch that was set up to help youth, connect with
junior rodeos. Yeah.
Perhaps, yes, perhaps. Because one of the things that we want to do is to be able to rope bees. And I'm sure there's a fantastic event for that. But yeah, that was what happened. There were nuisance laws that kept them from being able to keep that many hives in Pacifica. And so they had to transport them elsewhere. But they did extract honey in our garage.
Oh.
And when they were extracting the honey, they had to look at the garage and plug up all of the holes. Because as soon as you bring honey into an enclosed space, all of the insects inside of the area try to get inside, right? Because honey is a wonderful source of food, not just for us. So they would discover every single time they were doing the extraction of honey, just where all of the small holes were that insects could come into the garage, which was, kind of a separate space from the rest of the house. So it didn't affect the rest of the house. But yeah, totally fun.
Was the honey especially good?
It was delicious honey. I don't have a really sensitive palate. And of course, at the time, I was less than 10 years old. So, any sensitivity I have for my tasting palate right now was totally not there before I was 10. So I don't know as I could say it was better than regular store-bought honey. But, they sold it at farmers markets. They sold it at the Pacifica Rodeo during Frontier Days. And, yeah.
Wait, your parents actually sold honey during the junior rodeo?
Uh-huh, they totally did. It wasn't a junior rodeo. It was just a plain rodeo with juniors involved.
It had a junior rodeo component. We talked about this last time.
I know. But yes, they did, in fact, sell the honey there. And when the town of Pacifica transferred to having a fog fest instead of a junior rodeo, they did not continue selling at the fair area.
Well, no, the Fog Fest is going to smoke out all the bees.
Absolutely, right? Except it is always sunny on Fog Fest weekend. It is the worst time of year to actually have fog for the Fog Fest. So, for anybody who's planning on going to Pacifica at the end of September in order to go to the Fog Fest, bring sunscreen, wear a hat. It's going to be sunny.
And bring your own honey.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 shots of fear and adrenaline extracted from today's experiment, the Deadly Bees. Go, Charlotte, go!
The Deadly Bees was directed by Freddie Francis. Francis directed several low-budget horror films, including Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, Torture Garden, and 1974's Son of Dracula, starring musicians Harry Nilsson as the titular Son of Dracula and Ringo Starr as Merlin the Magician? Oh, and he also directed the 1972 anthology film Tales from the Crypt. Hi, Adam.
But he's perhaps better known for his work as a cinematographer, most notably working as director of photography for several David Lynch films, including The Elephant Man, Dune, and The Straight Story. You remember The Straight Story, the one where the guy has a road trip to Wisconsin on a lawnmower? Maybe I should finally get around to watching that one.
Well, I recommend it, Chris. Anyway, Susanna Lee, who plays our pop star Vicky, was also in Son of Dracula, but she might be better remembered for playing Elvis Presley's love interest in Paradise, Hawaiian Style. I mean, she might be better remembered for that if anyone remembered that film.
Mr. Hargrove, our beekeeper, who is horrible to his wife but doesn't apparently literally kill her, is played by Guy Dolman, who had a role in the James Bond film Thunderball but more importantly played one of the numbers 2 in the first episode of The Prisoner.
And Manfred, the actual killer in the film, was played by Frank Finley, who eagle-eyed viewers will recognize from his star turn as another villain, the slave trader Amafi from 1973's Shaft in Africa.
The Deadly Bees opens with a TV taping of a musical act, The Birds. No, not The Birds, The Birds. Okay, the Birds with a Y were the Americans who sang 8 Miles High and Turn, Turn, Turn. The Birds with an I were, well, they were in this film. They had released a few singles at this point, but then the Birds with a Y started getting big. Anyway, the Birds with an I called it quits shortly after appearing in the Deadly Bees.
But one member of the Birds with an I eventually went on to more successful projects. Blink and you'll miss him, but that's Ronnie Wood on guitar, the same Ronnie Wood who would later be in Faces with Rod Stewart, and then in the Rolling Stones.
When the movie's title screen appears, Mike says,
"Well, that's the hee-haw font. How can it be deadly?"
Hee Haw was a 1970s country music and comedy variety show, and the Deadly Bees font is absolutely not the Hee Haw font. Hee Haw used sans serif letters that were chunky and askew. The Deadly Bees uses a kooky slab serif font, a more personality-driven variant of Playbill, much closer to the Gunsmoke font than the Hee Haw font.
We get a bunch of musical references early on in the episode. Mike describes Vicky as,
"When I returned, he was with somebody new."
The female Anthony Newley.
Anthony Newley was an English singer and songwriter with a particular and easy-to-imitate way of dramatic singing, where he would hold on to notes for an uncomfortably long time. We'll link to a recording of him singing the theme to Goldfinger, which he wrote with composer John Barry.
Also, when bad guy Manfred introduces himself, we get this.
My name is Manfred.
You've heard of my Earth Band?
Manfred Mann is a South African singer who likes naming bands after himself. After his first band, Manfred Mann, had a hit with Bob Dylan's The Mighty Quinn in the 60s, he formed the jazz fusion group Manfred Mann Chapter 3, and then his third band, Manfred Mann's Earth Band, in 1971. Their biggest hit was a cover of Bruce Springsteen's Blinded by the Light.
During the TV show taping, none of the musicians are playing their songs. The Birds' guitars aren't even plugged in. So when Vicky keeps singing after she faints, Crow quips,
She still lip syncs better than Jewel.
Singer-songwriter Jewel was in charge of singing the national anthem to open Super Bowl XXXII. That's 32. Go Packers! And there was a bit of a scandal when Jewel lip-synced.
Turns out the Super Bowl pre-records audio whenever it can. And, I mean, what a surprise. You've only got minutes for the band to set up. You've got unpredictable weather. You've got bands doing elaborate choreography and an audience of billions expecting a flawless show. Honestly, it's fine. Sometimes putting on a good show requires a little pre-planning.
There's a young woman helping the Hargroves keep house, and at one point she heads home and Mike riffs,
"I'm off to become Lulu."
Scottish singer and actor Lulu is best known in the US for singing To Sir with Love and another Bond theme, The Man with the Golden Gun. But she's had a decades-long career in the UK. She even won Eurovision in 1969 with the song Boom Bang a Bang.
And that's time.
Hey, Chris, I think you're the bee's knees.
Aw, that's very sweet, except if you mean it the way that the phrase the bee's knees originally meant. Hey, there were a lot of phrases about bees and jokes about bee stuff in this, and it's fun, and there's lots of phrases in English about bees, and we should talk about some of them, and that'll be the next segment for the next 7 minutes, so let's enjoy.
Okay.
The bee's knees is a fun thing to say, isn't it?
I adore it. It's one of my favorites. I still say it. That and the cat's pajamas.
Well, and, you know, the bee's knees and the cat's pajamas both became big at around the same time.
20s?
In the 20s, exactly. There was a huge flapper fad for the animals something or other. And the bee's knees got pulled up into this because actually that phrase is much older than the cat's pajamas or the cat's whiskers or the snake's belly or whatever else it was.
I entirely did not know that. Did But clearly, given your reaction to me calling you the bee's knees, it didn't originally mean someone who was awesome and amazing. What did it originally mean?
Well, like a bee's knees, it meant something small and insignificant.
What? Bees' knees are really important to bees?
Well, I didn't actually look up to see whether bees actually have knees per se. I kind of assumed they don't, but either way, they're quite tiny is the idea. But then it just became a fun thing to say in the 20s.
It is a fun thing to say, there is no question. And I certainly didn't mean that you are insignificant or tiny, Chris.
I'm definitely not tiny these days.
And how you have never been insignificant. Not
All
to
right.
me.
Well, we'll see about that. We'll let history decide that one.
Sure.
So what other bee phrases get mentioned or can you think of?
We start out with them saying, oh, bees, we're actually not that busy. We move at a fairly chill pace. Like, busy as a bee is totally a phrase. Where does that one come from?
That comes from a fair while ago. That is from the 1500s.
Oh.
Because bees are, well, they're industrious, or so it appears. And I think it's pretty reasonable thing to say about bees.
I would think so.
Yeah. And people were domesticating bees and making honey out of them and so forth. So in the 1700s, there's a poet named Isaac Watts who wrote a famous poem about bees. How doth the little busy bee improve each shining hour and gather honey all the day from every opening flower.
Aww.
Which you might recognize if you've read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, because Lewis Carroll did How doth the little crocodile, etc., etc.
Most definitely. Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. I didn't realize that the Alice in Wonderland riff had something that it originated from. So that's very cool.
Oh, yeah. What else? You can have a bee.
Chris, you say I can have a bee? What is it to have a bee?
Well, like a quilting bee.
Oh, yeah. So like an event.
Like an event where you gather together and you maybe all gather together, pitch in to do something for someone in your society, in your community.
Oh, so not just quilting? It could be like a cooking bee or something?
Well, some of the other bees were things like logging bees, if you want to roll a bunch of logs down, or husking bees.
Husking? Like corn husking?
Like corn, when the corn crop comes in, all the community gets together to husk the corn. Or hanging bees.
I don't want to know what a hanging bee is, do I?
It's a lynching.
Yeah, I don't want. Let's not have any.
No, all right,
of
let's
those.
move on. That's a terrible thing. That's a no good thing. Spelling bees also happen.
Bees.
So
yes.
spelling bees came from a sort of more extended use of that to mean an event. Like you said, it's not just specifically we're gathering to do something for someone. Like the idea that bees are very social and they do things together. We all make a quilt together for one member of the community. A spelling bee is just a spelling party or spelling event, something like that.
Gosh, I always think of it as more of a contest, but I like thinking of it more as an event.
Sure. There's also a phrase which I had never heard before until I was looking these things up called putting the bee on.
I don't know this phrase.
Yeah. When you're putting the bee on, you're asking someone for money.
Oh.
Such as asking people to go to our Patreon at patreon.com/it's just a show or it's just a show.com/Patreon, because it's like organizing a bee to fundraise. It's like a money bee, I suppose. Although I don't think that phrase ever got used.
A funding bee. A funding bee.
Something like that.
It's like a pledge break.
It's something like that. So you can put the bee on someone by shaking them down for money.
All right. Sounds good. Are there other good bee sayings out there?
Of course. I mean, anything else you can think of?
Oh, none of your beeswax, Chris.
There you go. Well, so you're sticking to the ones that are from the 20s. It's the fun thing here.
Oh, well, I have an era. No, it's not my era. Anyway.
None of your beeswax seems to come from the 20s, from the Lower East Side. Surprise, surprise.
What? There were bees in the Lower East Side? Come on.
No, but there were people who like to say things in funny ways. And so saying something like none of your business into none of your beesness into none of your beeswax seems to be a joke you can make. And it's a good joke.
Sure, that seems a fair progression of phrasing.
Also from that sort of period, or maybe a little bit earlier, there's the idea of somebody having bee-stung lips.
Oh, that's not just a recent thing, huh, with the collagen implants? It's, using the venom for bees to poof up your lips like this?
Well, it's something that someone said about, in particular, a silent movie star named Mae Murray, who had a pronounced, perhaps not quite Lisa Rinna-ish pout, but she became known as the girl with the bee-stung lips.
Totally different than the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yes, but, they should hang out, those girls.
Sure. They sound dangerous, actually.
What else? We've got, there's the hairstyle, the beehive.
I know my mother swears she never had an actual beehive, but perhaps her hairstyle was more like a rat's nest. I don't know. All that 60s stuff, that hair is just so big. So big.
It seems that the hairstyle itself came a few years before the name for the hairstyle, but I don't know what they were calling it before they called it a beehive.
Seriously. Once you called it a beehive, I don't think you ever could have gotten rid of that word. It's super descriptive for what that looks like.
Yeah. Plus, if you have a beehive hairdo, it's a bit hard to have a bee in your bonnet.
So true. That's a good one. I always forget about what a good phrase that is.
Yeah. Well, what does it mean?
A bee in your bonnet is like having something itching at you that you have to take care of. Like having a bee in your bonnet is just having that. I always think of it as having like an annoying little idea that needs to be fixed.
Exactly. So that's the way it's usually used. It can also be used to mean being harebrained, so to speak.
Oh.
Which is a different animal, but nevertheless.
That's very different in phrasing, right? Here's a thought I need to take care of versus I have no thoughts at all.
Well, and the idea is that they both come from the phrase of being full of bees.
Oh.
Which is to say you have nothing but buzzing going on in your head.
Oh.
Which dates from the 1500s.
No way.
Yeah.
Very Winnie the Pooh.
Exactly. And what else? I think I had one or two others.
Oh, did you have the birds and the bees?
I did.
Oh.
Well, we all know what the birds and the bees mean.
Yes, but why?
Well, that's a good question. And I don't think we have an answer for that per se, except that
birds and bees make stuff?
I guess. It dates to the late 1800s. It becomes popular again in the 20s with the Cole Porter song about how birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. Let's fall in love. Great song.
So good. Yes.
And its use in his very popular song might be the reason why the phrase "the birds and the bees" stuck around quite a bit longer than even like the bee's knees, which we use, but not as natively as...
but certainly
exactly.
None of the children I interact with use.
Right. Whereas there's a small likelihood that the phrase "the birds and the bees" might be something that they would use, so to speak, naturally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you have one more for us?
Yes. The last one I've got for you is all about making a beeline.
That's okay. So that seems really weird to me. Like, cause I think of making a beeline as like having a super direct path to get things done. But bees kind of like, if you watch them, they kind of meander around from flower to flower.
Would you say they bumble sometimes?
Perhaps they do bumble sometimes.
So here's the thing. I saw some sources arguing that making a beeline was being, direct like a bee is, but that may not actually be the origin, because there is a term from the 1830s called lining a bee.
What?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means following a bee to find its honey, to find its hive in the woods.
Oh, that sounds very Pooh.
It's bee hunting.
Yeah. Okay.
So you'd be lining a bee, and therefore you're making a beeline, and that you're very focused on going to where you're trying to go in the way that you'd have to be if you're trying to follow a bee in the woods.
Seriously. I think I would get lost. There's so many.
Well, I guess there's that. But yeah, it just seems like a tiny target to follow. I don't know. I've never done it, and I don't think I want to.
Well, thankfully you don't have to. Honey is readily available for us. But I can imagine several hundred years ago not being able to go to a store and get honey. Yeah, I might follow a bee around for a little while. Honey is really good.
It's really good. Well, we are just about out of time with all this buzzing of activity that we've been doing. I suppose we have time for just one more final factoid. Have you got something you want to talk about?
Well, I don't know if this is quite a factoid, but more like a final thought. At one point in time in the episode, they're referring to the young lady who has been helping around the house, and she's being chased by the bees, and she falls down in like a big old puddle of water. And the riffers refer to her as Non-descript spice. You know what they're referencing, I'm sure, Chris.
Well, I am old enough to remember the Spice Girls. I don't think you have to be that old to remember them, but still.
I would hope not. I mean, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So, yes, the original Spice Girls, there were 5 of them. There was Baby Spice, Ginger Spice, Posh Spice, Sporty Spice, and of course, Scary Spice.
Yes.
And so I wanted to ask you, Chris, if you were a Spice Girl, what Spice Girl would you be?
So here's the thing. When you hear that question in the wild,
as it were,
naturally you start thinking about spices, but only one of the Spice Girls is named after a spice.
No, it's true. I think most people would think that I'd be like Old Spice or something more like that, right?
Oh, now that's a good tempting one.
Ooh,
But
isn't it though?
but ever since that Old Spice guy got famous, I can't live up to him.
Wow, you can be like Fabio. Fabio might be my favorite Old Spice.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I would be Sour Spice.
Oh, stop! Oh, that's a really good one. Nice work.
Did you have one?
Oh, because I originally went to spices, I'm starting to, I'm thinking about my cabinet of spices and things. And of course, I also think about in Blue's Clues when Salt and Pepper have a kid, their kid's name is Paprika. So I think I would have to be like Paprika Spice or something.
Oh, that's good. So I just filled out this BuzzFeed quiz while you were asking me the question.
Oh,
that would tell me what my spice name was.
Of course there's a BuzzFeed quiz.
Of course there is. And I put in my entries and I ended up being Frizzy Spice.
What?
Yeah. So let me real quick enter your information.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I'm just putting your information in. I know all the basic stuff about your bio and such, but it ends with who's your favorite Spice Girl, and you can choose any one of the 5, or you can say I love all of them.
Oh, my favorite Spice Girl is Sporty Spice.
Sporty Spice. They tell. Okay, you're also Frizzy Spice.
Stop it!
We're both Frizzy
I'm
Spices.
Not frizzy.
I'm not frizzy either. I think BuzzFeed is broken.
All right, well, fine. BuzzFeed is the bad bee. That's the deadly bee. BuzzFeed is the deadly bee, everyone.
Although I've now looked down and there's a link to another quiz about what type of French fry you are.
Oh.
And now I think I see the 2 options here, and I think that you are Sweet Potato Spice and I am Crinkle Cut Spice.
I love you, Crinkle Cut Spice.
I love you, Sweet Potato Spice.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if your suspicious neighbor is keeping bees, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or you can reach us on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you and like our randomly selected supporter, Christian. Thank you, Christian. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Christian and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our super fan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/134. Chris, we just did the killer shrews. We moved to deadly bees. I don't know if I could handle any more animal attacks. What's coming up next?
Well, next we're going to go over to a new cluster of episodes on a new topic for us, and we're going to visit a part of the show's history that we haven't been to in a little while, and we have, in fact, underexplored. We're going to dip into Season 2, and we're going to do the Bike Movie Trilogy.
Oh, I love the Bike movie trilogy.
Oh, we've been having requests for years to cover these movies, and I am very excited to do that. We're going to start with Season 2, Episode 2, The Side Hackers.
Is this the one where I'd love to, but your lips are drugged?
Yep, and it's also the one where they had to cut out part of the movie because there's a really violent scene in the original film, and that was when they realized that they need to watch the movies all the way through before agreeing to do them.
Yes, that was an important lesson to learn. I can't believe it took them until Season 2.
So yeah, we'll watch the version without that in it, but you've seen this episode before. It's a good one.
I've seen all of them from this trilogy. I'm really looking forward to this.
Me too. But until then...
Hello, I'm here for the movie. Am I late?
Damn, it's these Be Loud Glades that Yates was talking about. Take it away, Theme Squad.